bet our long-range track is about to pay off. One nice buck and one really good size one, about 4 or 5 does. That's the third time I've seen them come down in through here. Obviously, there must be some kind of trail system. There's an old fence line that comes across there. All I'm going to do is go in there now. Give them time to bed down. They're moving off. They're not even spooked. All I'm going to do is go down there and start looking for trails. Man. I love to get out here and shoot in the woods like this, practice. Hi, I'm Mike Lipinski, and it will be my pleasure to introduce you to the intricate world of tracking and blood trailing deer. This is probably the most important video you'll ever watch on the subject of deer hunting. Why? Because you'll learn not only how to track your buck for a close shot, but you'll also learn how to blood trail and retrieve your trophy. Actually, tracking and blood trailing go hand in hand, because the closer you can track in to your buck for a deadly close range shot, the easier your blood trailing chore is going to be. Remember, this is exciting. But ultimately, this is what you want to experience. You know, tracking is much more involved than simply following a buck's track. Successful tracking begins at long range, when you first start scouting out a promising area, and ends up at short range, when you're actually narrowing down this huge area to that one particular spot where you're going to shoot your buck. The best time to scout out a promising area is a couple of months before the season actually begins. That way, any deer you may have spooked when you first went in there will be back to their daily feeding routine.
Generally, a deer moves through a daily routine of feeding in the morning and then going to its bedding area. In evening, it leaves the bedding area and returns to its feeding grounds. This is called the feed-to-bed cycle, and when undisturbed, deer will depart very little from this daily routine. They'll feed in the same fields, bed in the same cover, and travel the same trail back and forth between them. This is exactly what the long-range tracker is looking for, and the first clue will always be found with the deer's food supply. Basically, a deer's life revolves around its search for food. So if you want to locate the deer, simply find their food source. It may be a rich green alfalfa field, an oak grove, or an old apple orchard. Every region is different, so find what the deer like to eat in your area and begin long-distance glassing in the early morning and evening.
The long-range phase of tracking is now complete. Next comes the exciting part, when you'll actually pick that exact spot where you'll harvest your trophy buck.
After you've spotted deer feeding, watch closely where they disappear to in early morning and where they emerge from in the evening. In midday, slip into the area where the deer had disappeared and search out the game trails they're using. There will probably be more than one game trail, especially near their feeding grounds, because the deer usually leave in the most convenient spot. Quietly follow these game trails back toward their bedding ground. Study the tracks in the trails and determine which trails the bucks are using. A buck's track will be much larger than a doe's, and its heavy body tends to push its dew claws farther down. So look for a large hoof track with the telltale dew claws showing, which identifies its maker to be a buck. Search for some landmark or physical obstruction that funnels deer into a narrow corridor. Funnels are created by such obstructions as fence lines, bridges, strips of timber, thick brush patches, or streams.
Oh, this is perfect. 3 trails coming together right here at this fence line. Eventually, you can see all these meandering game trails are going to get funneled into that one exact spot, one main game trail. This is the exact spot where you're going to harvest your buck. Now, the vast majority of deer are harvested from tree stands. So what you have to do after you find that perfect spot in the main game trail is to find a tree maybe 20 yards away on the downwind side. Now the wind is prevailing mostly this way all the time. And I see a tree right over here about 20 yards, nice and slim and sturdy. I think this is where I'm going to put my tree stand, right by these game trails. Look at this. This is a perfect spot, a perfect location. There's enough limbs up here, give you a little cover so they won't see you from far away. Perfect shot into all 3 trails coming right together there. This is perfect.
Place the tree stand about 20 feet above the ground and then sit in the stand and survey the trail below. Break off any branches that will interfere with your movement or shooting. If you are using sights on your bow, measure the exact distance to the most likely spot where you will be shooting your deer.
You know, I'd rather forget my bow up here than forget this thing here, this safety belt. The vast majority of bow hunting accidents and deaths are caused by falls from trees. Never get up in a tree or in a tree stand without one of these safety belts. One thing you want to do, you get up in your tree stand before the season, is do some target practice. It really looks different up here. Check your shooting lanes and oh, perfect. It looks a little different, but you get used to it quick. It's really important. Now let's learn a little bit about the animal we're hunting.
When the deer rut begins, the deer may abandon their feed-to-bed routine, and you'll discover that the game trails that had been heavily used just last week are used less frequently because the bucks will be more interested in mating than feeding. If the bucks disappear from the trail you're hunting over, do some quick scouting and seek out rub and scrape lines. A rub is simply a bark-scarred tree or bush that a buck rakes his antlers on and leaves his scent on. Usually, a buck will make a series of rubs around the perimeter of his home range. Then he will make a series of scrapes and visit them often during day or night to see if a doe in heat has stopped by. A scrape is made when a buck paws the forest floor and urinates in the fresh earth. He'll also lick a branch above the scrape and rub scent from a gland at the base of his antlers on that branch. A doe in heat will investigate this scrape, urinate in it, and then meander off, waiting for the buck to discover her scent at the scrape and come sniffing after her. If you find a line of fresh buck scrapes, set up a tree stand at a promising location and be prepared to hunt all day. During the rut, expect to find a rut-crazed buck checking his scrape line at any hour of the day.
Okay, you've done a good job tracking. You got a hot trail and you got a tree stand right above the trail and the bucks are coming by every day. Now, let's talk about shot selection. One of the most critical decisions you'll make is what type of shot to attempt. Make a perfect shot in a vital area and you'll have an easy blood trail to follow. If you make a poor hit, it's going to be a very, very difficult blood trail. An oncoming deer will offer several angles as it's coming towards you. Some are good and some should be avoided.
The best place to shoot a deer is through both lungs, and the only way to accomplish that is with a standing broadside shot. Another good shot is a slightly quartering away shot because the broadhead will not only hit both lungs but may also slice through the liver. All other shots, like this quartering forward shot or this frontal shot, should be avoided. Here's why the lung is the very best place to hit a deer with an arrow. Watch how long it takes this buck to go down after being hit through the lungs. The clock begins when the arrow strikes the buck. course, a lung shot buck isn't always going to drop within sight. But the results of a lung shot are always quick and mortal, making the job of blood trailing much easier.
During your preseason practice at your local pro shop, it's a good idea to also shoot some broadheads, because a broadhead tends to make an arrow fly a little differently than a field point. Now, these styrofoam targets are really good for both field points or broadheads. Remember, don't go jumping around with broadheads too much because the arrows don't fly right. My local pro says that it's usually bow tuning that's the problem, not broadhead selection. Doesn't matter which type of broadhead you choose, the very best broadhead to use is a razor sharp one. For you archers who want to have even more lifelike preseason archery practice, I've got some great news for you. There's a new high-tech target system that uses a video screen which displays full-dimension animals walking in natural setting. You stand back in this tunnel, a little bit dark so you can see the video well, and you just wait for an animal to come along. When you get the proper shot, you take it, and with this particular system, the screen stops, and it will show you exactly where your arrow hit, and show you the vital area, and actually score your hit. You can actually have competitions. I'll tell you, this is such a lifelike system that your palms actually get sweaty. I highly recommend it. It's just like being out in the woods. You'll get the feel of a deer moving through the trees. You'll be able to pick that shot. Don't shoot at a moving deer. If there's a twig in the way, you'll be waiting, and you get that perfect shot, and you'll take it. Okay, what's up next? Let's see. It may be a deer or it may be an elk. Oh, it's a nice buck. Let's see if I can get him. Perfect. 5 points. Not exactly dead center, but good enough to kill that buck. Now we've got some elk. That is a big animal. We'll probably miss. Like I said, it's good to get such practice because you do get nervous. Isn't that great fun? I just get nervous. I get wrapped up in this thing. I forget I'm in my local archery pro shop, and you get deer, elk, water buffalo, whatever's on the tape come through, and it's just really exciting. This is just like being there. It's going to make you a better archer, a better bow hunter. You're going to get more effective shot selection. You know when to shoot, when not to shoot, because you've already gone through a hunting situation. You're not experiencing that first time in the field what to do. You've already made mistakes, and this screen has already told me, I shouldn't have made a shot. This is great. Try it at your local pro shop. As ethical sportsmen, we have the responsibility of retrieving any mortally wounded game animal. In fact, in most states, that's the law. And since most bowshot deer die from massive hemorrhaging, that's going to mean we're going to have to follow a blood trail. So let's examine the basics of blood trailing, and then we'll cover the 6 most common hits on deer.
She doesn't even see me. Good. Okay, as soon as I can get her.
The first and most important step leading to the retrieval of your trophy is to stay calm. Those few frenzied moments when the shot is made often cloud an otherwise rational sportsman's thinking, and in his excitement he may get the urge to rush after a wounded deer. Don't do it. Always wait about an hour to allow the wounded deer to run off, bed down, and bleed to death. True, this waiting period is used to allow the deer to bleed out, but it's also a quiet period when an excited bow hunter can regain his composure.
Oh, 4 of those deer are there for 10 minutes. This area is completely open. A couple of these poplar trees just got skinny little branches, and that one big doe had a branch right in front of her chest. I finally had to kind of crouch down from standing up, and I was able to shoot underneath that branch, and I hit her really good, right at about the last rib. I probably got the tip of the lungs and the liver too. Where she was really hurt. I saw her walk into a thicket over there with her tail up and everything. I'm gonna give her about half hour, 45 minutes, and then go and see if I could see something about her.
Immediately after a deer is hit, note the exact spot where it was standing, and then note the exact spot where the fleeing deer disappears. You can quietly proceed to these two spots and mark them. This is very helpful because it gives you the direction or line of sight where the animal ran. When a deer is shot, it immediately runs off, but the blood from its wound may not appear on the ground for anywhere from 10 to 100 feet. That's why it's necessary to search along that line of sight you just established for the first drops of blood.
Remember, a bow-shot animal will die from massive hemorrhaging, but most of that profuse bleeding will be internal. And this is especially true when a deer is shot from up above from a tree stand. The arrow will enter high in the rib cage and angle downward. If the shaft does not exit at the bottom of the chest, most of the blood will well up inside the deer. Even though a buck is mortally wounded and literally dead on his feet, he may leave only a small string of blood drops. Remember, a light blood trail is not an indicator of how mortally wounded a buck may be. Now let's look at the 6 most common hits on deer.
The most desirable hit is the broadside lung shot. The lungs sit forward in the deer's chest cavity and are protected by the deer's foreleg and shoulder blade. Watch as Mike makes a perfect quartering lung shot, and note how the deer, though mortally wounded, runs off as if unhurt. Notice how Mike runs ahead to see where the buck disappears in the draw to get a line of sight. The average retrieval distance of a deer shot through the lungs is about 100 yards. The blood trail will show a profusion of bright red, frothy blood. Of course, ground conditions help a lot. Look how much easier it is to see the blood on this snow than on the bare ground. But even with a deadly lung hit, don't be surprised if the blood trail is light, because most of the bleeding will be inside the deer's chest.
Good blood.
When you find a drop of blood, mark it and proceed on. After a while, you may see a completely different line of flight developing, and you can start following that line of flight for more blood drops. Whenever a downed deer is located, always approach it from behind, even if it looks dead. Take an arrow and touch its eye to make sure it has expired. And now, congratulations on your trophy. Now watch as Mike stalks and shoots this buck square in the chest, but a little far back in the rib cage. If your arrow hits the deer in the chest but a little far back, the arrow may miss the lungs but pass through the liver, which lies flat against the diaphragm behind the lungs. A liver hit is deadly and always mortal, but depending on how badly the liver was lacerated, death may take as little as a few minutes or as much as hours. Generally, the blood trail from a liver hit will be copious and easy to follow. The blood will have a rich red color with no seeds or air bubbles in it. A liver hit deer will feel very sick and head for the nearest available cover to bed down. Go slow and look ahead for obvious bedding areas such as thickets, and check often to note any changes in the line of flight of the blood trail. A good shot was made and a good blood trail resulted. That adds up to a proud bow hunter with his trophy.
They're feeding. They're undisturbed. They're in good shape here. She's starting to move. Come on, girl, move out just a little left. Darn, I just can't quite see around the tree here. Needs to move just a little. Here she comes. Here she comes.
An arrow that hits the backbone usually severs the spine, and the deer will go down immediately. Now watch how this deer reacts when shot in the spine. That's the beauty of a spine shot. It's always a quick, humane kill.
Alright, she's dead. That spine shot really did the number on her.
The next two kinds of hits that we'll discuss are the paunch and the femur hits. These kind of hits usually occur when the deer jumps a string and lurches forward while the arrow is still in the air. But the good news is that even with these less desirable hits, a deer can still be retrieved.
The term jumping the string simply means that a deer reacts instinctively to the noise of a bowstring. Now watch how this spike buck reacts at the sound of the bowstring. The square outlines the buck's chest before it jumps the string. The arrow zips perfectly into the square, but the buck has already jumped forward, resulting in a paunch hit. The best way to avoid a deer jumping your string is to never shoot at a deer when it is watching you, and tune your bow until its release is whisper quiet. The paunch area consists of the stomach, digestive tract, and spleen, and is located behind the rib cage. Watch what happens when this bowhunter shot is true, but the deer jumps the string. A paunch hit is always fatal, but it may take the wounded deer from 2 to 24 hours to die. Unlike the other hits, which cause death from hemorrhaging, death from a paunch hit is usually due to peritonitis, which occurs when the impurities in the deer's digestive system invade its germ-free body cavity and profuse bacterial infection rapidly sets in. The blood trail from a paunch hit deer will be light, and the blood will be dark red and contain seeds and other vegetative matter. Even though it may take several hours for the deer to die, it will feel sick immediately and seek the nearest cover to bed down. It is imperative to not push the animal out of this bed. If your deer is paunch hit, hold off blood trailing for at least 4 hours. And if you kick out the wounded animal, watch where it beds down again, and then sit back and wait for another 4 hours. Following the blood trail on a paunch hit animal is a long and tedious chore, and that's why experienced bow hunters hold off taking marginal shots. But remember, a paunch hit deer is still retrievable. An arrow that hits the rear hams of a deer is potentially fatal because of the large femoral artery that runs along the inside of the femur bone. The blood trail from a femur hit will show a gushing dark red spray as if spewed from a water spigot. The deer may run hard as if unhurt, but it will literally bleed to death within seconds or minutes. Now watch in this hunting sequence as a big buck is hit high in the ham. The femur hit buck charges off as if unfazed, but collapses within 100 yards. A fine trophy awaits a persistent hunter. A neck hit on a deer usually happens when the deer jumps the string. As you can see, the neck is a very small target, even at close range, and such a shot should be avoided. Still, an arrow that hits a deer's neck usually kills it quickly. That's because two major blood vessels, the carotid artery and the jugular vein, are located along either side of the windpipe, but back close to the neck vertebrae. Even if the arrow misses both blood vessels and hits the neck bone instead, death is usually instant because the broadhead will sever the spinal cord. Now watch as this deer is shot in the neck. Though mortally wounded, it bounds off as if unhurt. Right through her. The blood trail on a neck hit will be copious. Expect to find a rich red spray of blood from a neck hit deer. And since the wound is high up on the deer, you'll even find blood sprayed high on the brush.
Well, it's true that a neck hit or a paunch or spine hit usually happens when the deer jumps a string. Brush deflection will often sometimes cause those kinds of hits. Even the best aimed arrow will deflect off course if it hits a branch even as small as this one. Now you have no control over a deer jumping your stream, but you can avoid a marginal shot that will cause an arrow to deflect off a branch. I'll use this sapling to prove a point I want to make. Let's just pretend that I'm a deer. Now, if you put a deer in this great big open field, nothing else around, right on this side of this little sapling, great, no problem, nice shot. I go on this side, get a deer over here, still got a nice big shot. But if that deer takes one step, and you're ready to shoot, and he's got this sapling in front of him, look how a big target is made into just two little tiny ones. The tendency is for a bow hunter to try and slip an arrow in through here. And of course, you know what happens. It's been proven psychologically, if you're even trying to slip an arrow by here, you're looking at this more than you are the deer's chest. And what happens, anybody who's bow hunted very long knows what happens. Whack. So don't try and slip an arrow through some limbs or by a sapling. An arrow that hits a sapling is going to deflect off course like that, and it's going to cause an undesirable hit, and you're going to have a hard time following the blood trail. Avoid those shots.
So, if a deer is in a brushy spot where you might have to squeeze an arrow through a small window, you'd be smart to pass up the shot and wait for an opening. This next sequence illustrates another problem which causes arrow deflection. An arrow actually arcs through the air as it flies toward its target. And just because you have a good view of a buck's chest 40 yards away, don't forget that the arrow may actually arc up to 5 feet above your line of sight on its way to the deer. Here's a good example of arrow arc. This big muley buck is 35 yards away. Watch how high the arrow arcs on its way to the deer. When bow hunter Jim Wilkins watched this video clip of his hunt, he was shocked at how much his arrow's flight path departed from his line of sight. Now, look at the great shot this buck offers at 20 yards. At this distance, an arrow will not arc more than a half foot or so. But take the same shot back at 40 yards, and this limb may cause the arcing arrow to deflect. Add a walking deer to the complication of a deer in brush at 40 yards, and you can see why an archer who can consistently put every arrow in the killing zone of a deer target is often bewildered when he misses so badly in the field. When a deer comes in, you'll be presented with a variety of shots at various distances and angles. Hold off on these shots until the proper shot is offered. That usually means a broadside 20-yard shot in the open. Now, watch as Mike spots a buck approaching his tree stand. There are lots of shots, but he waits for his shot that he knows he can't miss. That's the secret of a successful bow hunter: persistence, patience, and good shot selection.
Good. I gotta get ready here. Oh, that other one's behind a buck too. Okay. Oh, it's going away from me. Got it. Oh, wait a minute. He's curving in. He's getting close. That's what hunting's all about for white-tailed deer from a tree stand. Those two forked horn bucks come in. That one in the lead over my way, that one hanging back. He come right around towards me. I thought he was gonna come right under the stand. Come around that one big tree and just, he had me made. I was just ready to start drawing. He caught me in mid-draw. I figured, this is it. Pretty good quartering shot. I just put it right behind the shoulder. Boy, it just zipped right down in there. He ran off there like he wasn't even hurt, but I see the arrow over there. It's all bloody. I think he's just right over here, to tell you the truth. Because I watched it open all around this thicket. He never come out of the thicket. And usually, a lot of times, when they spook like that and suddenly like everything's okay, they're not running spooked, it means that they're hurting if they're just walking. I think that he's dead over there right now. I'm just gonna go over to the arrow and check things out. I'm gonna sit for about an hour after that. Blood sign. I didn't think he'd go to that thicket, but he's got on that thicket back there, and one thing he's moving downhill. He's dropping a bright reddish blood, almost like a liver hit. Oh, I think I see him. I knew I hit him good. Ah. Okay. Aha. Getting back just a little bit further than I thought. I thought I got him right behind the shoulder. I got him right about the middle of his angling back. That's why I'm sure that I saw that dark red liver blood, because it did angle back. Well, he's a nice little forky. The arrow came out and going down and back, and just like that. That's really neat. He went about maybe about 100 yards is all. That one thicket was about 50 yards, but I thought he'd come out. If I saw him, he went through it and then straight away from me. That's why I thought he stayed right in there. But he'd just come another 50 yards out of it. Usually when they're hurting, they'll come and look for some kind of cover like this to get under it, seclusion and hide or something. Sure enough, he's looking for the one nice thick spot in this opening here. You bow hunters who hunt later in the year, when there's snow on the ground, have a tremendous advantage. Besides the obvious fact that the well-camouflaged deer in his natural environment, in the early season, you can't hardly see him. On the snow, even the smartest buck is easily seen against this background of white. Snow is even helpful after the season's over with. You leave your bow behind and get out there in the snow and check out where those bucks are moving through. Boy, you just can't miss it. Find the bedding, find the feeding areas, and then when the season comes around next year, you'll know how they already move.
While you're out scouting in the snow after the season, take along a camera and try to move in on deer. This is great training for a sportsman who wants to develop his stalking and still hunting skills. You'll quickly learn what types of noise and movement you can and can't get away with when moving in on deer. You'll end up a better hunter, and you may even have a few great deer photos to hang in your den. Besides the fact that a deer's brown body shows up well against a white background, snow is also a great aid when blood trailing a bow-shot buck. Look at how well this blood trail shows up in the snow. But a short distance away is bare ground, and the blood is much harder to find. For all its benefits, snow sometimes causes a bit of a problem for a bow hunter. Those fall deer that you have patterned so well may suddenly change their routine after snow covers the ground. They may abandon the open fields and stick closer to the thickets. But with snow on the ground, you'll be able to quickly find their tracks and set up a tree stand along their new bed-to-feed route. Snow even helps you determine if a track came from a buck. Normally, the heavy-bodied buck will drag his hooves forward, while a doe will step down and up neatly. Look for the telltale drag marks in the snow, and you can be sure a buck made those tracks.
I hope you've enjoyed this video on tracking and blood trailing your deer. Remember, the 3 ingredients of a successful bow hunter are persistence, patience, and good shot selection. The future of our great sport depends on you and me acting as ethical, responsible sportsmen. We'll leave you now with several additional tips to further help your hunt end in success. Hey, been fun, good luck, good hunting.
Tip number 1. Never shoot at a deer when it is looking in your direction. It will almost certainly jump the string. This is where most paunch hits occur. Wait until the deer turns its head away before you shoot. Never shoot at a rapidly moving deer. It's almost impossible to time the arrow's flight with the deer's movement. Either wait for a standing shot or wait for another day. Tip number 3. Carry a half-dozen fluorescent painted clothespins or these commercially available flags to mark the line of sight of the blood trail. Tip number 4. Always hunt with razor-sharp broadheads to ensure optimum hemorrhaging. Remember, a sharp broadhead ensures a good blood trail. Tip number 5. A mortally wounded animal will always head downhill. If you momentarily lose the blood trail, look ahead to obvious passageways such as ridges, game trails, or gullies. Tip number 6. You can speed up the blood trailing process by occasionally jumping ahead to areas where blood is sure to show, such as on old silvery logs or across pale rocks or a road. Number 7. Use bright fletching on your arrows so that you can see where the shaft hits your buck. That way you can better assess what type of hit was made. Tip number 8. To ensure full penetration on a deer, a compound in the 40-pound range is a good pull weight. A recurve should have a pull weight in the 45-pound range. Tip number 9. Avoid hunting in heavy rain because water will wash the blood away even from a good blood trail. Tip 10. Snowy weather is a great aid for the tracking bow hunter because the blood shows up well on snow.